Hey there, I'd just like to ask before the video starts, if you like what you see, please give us a click on the like and subscribe buttons. Hello, I'm Karl Wells. My guest today has had what can only be described as an extraordinary career. And believe it or not, it began right here in this very building. He went to work as a very young fellow with Avalon Cablevision, then ended up becoming president of Cable Atlantic, a much larger company. Then he became a vice president at Rogers Communications. Then he went with Persona Communications as their CEO. It's been onward and upward ever since, and he's still very much involved in business with Deacon Investments, Deacon Sports and Entertainment, and sits on various boards, God knows where. Anyway, it's my pleasure to have the very busy Dean MacDonald on the program. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you for the privilege.
Dean, I had to start with this question, because I actually don't know where you're from. Where did you grow up?
I grew up on Smithville Crescent, St. John's, right across from Gonzaga.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Where the former Mayor John Murphy
Absolutely, up at the top of the
years.
street. Yeah.
Yeah. So where did you go to school?
Well, based on where I lived, I went to Pies 10th, now Rennie's River School, from kindergarten to 9, and then Gonzaga from 10 and 11, because it was only 11 then. Now I'm really feeling old, but yeah, so I walked to school every day. It was all of 100 yards.
So I'm curious, did you study business at university?
I did. My father was a businessman, but it wasn't kind of a passion at the time. It seemed like something to do, like any 17-year-old coming out of high school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do.
So how did you end up coming to this building and walking through the doors here and taking a job?
So it was all, circumstance. I was at Dalhousie doing my MBA first year. My dad passed away just as I got there. And so I came back and I said, okay, I'm not gonna go to university this year. I want to be with my mom and et cetera. And I had a call from Noel O'Day, the owner of Target Marketing, who at the time was a prof. He was writing a book on marketing. He said, look, would you like to come and kind of be my researcher? I said yes, and a few months into that, Avalon Cable at the time was looking for a marketing manager. And his sister-in-law, Charlotte O'Day, who I'm sure you probably know, they reached out to me. I had an interview with Danny and I was hired.
So you were a marketing guy?
Oh, absolutely. More, I studied consumer behavior was my major, but yeah, I guess marketing for sure.
There's a funny story about when you in the early days when you were working here, you found out about something that would happen around lunchtime.
Oh, gee, yeah.
And it kind of surprised you. Tell us the story.
Well, I was lynched. So a couple of weeks into the job, I noticed at noon every day, we had counters, because back in the day there was no electronic payments, as people would come in to pay their bills for the most part. And so at noon every day, we would shut the counter for, between noon and 2. So, I said, why are we shutting the counters? And they'd say, well, it's lunch. And I said, well, not anymore. Like, it was so hard to pay your bill at the time. People were making the time and effort to get in here. I said, guys, we're going to be open. Well, that caused quite the stir, let me tell you. But, I survived it. Ego bruised, maybe. But it was the right thing to do.
They were probably saying, who is this guy?
Oh,
he's like,
who's this
interrupting our lunch.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you developed a pretty good working relationship with Mr. Danny Williams.
Yes, I did.
Some would say you had great chemistry. Talk about that working relationship you had with Mr. Williams?
Danny was like a big brother, and we had so much fun. One of his great strengths is he believed in young people, so he gave me a shot, and understood that mistakes are going to be made with lack of experience. But we had so much fun. So it was work hard, play hard. We were competitive in everything. We played against each other. We traveled a lot together. We just had so much fun. It was a great learning experience for me, because he was an incredible, incredibly smart person, and incredible work capacity. If I learned anything from Danny, it was we worked very hard.
So eventually, you were made president of Cable Atlantic. Now, Cable Atlantic was a much different animal from Avalon Cablevision, wasn't it? Because if memory serves, there was a lot of acquisitions that took place.
Yeah.
Just talk about that.
So it was funny, really. So I was the general manager of Cable or Avalon Cable. In fact, Danny took the risk there. I was 25 years old, and we started to. The industry was consolidating, so we were looking to grow. And we weren't very big in the context of, the Rogers and the Shaws and all these guys. So we were looking in Europe. So we were banging around Ireland and some other places saying, look, this might be a good place to invest and grow. And on the flight back, we kind of looked at each other and said, look, let's see what we can do closer to home. And we bought Gander, Grand Falls, Corner Brook, Deer Lake, Port aux Basques. So we kind of bought along the Trans-Canada Highway, and that's when we changed the name to Cable Atlantic.
What about the Maritimes? Did you have any?
Oh, we had voracious appetite, but buying those companies was tough, because everyone was a fiefdom in its own right. And so none of the people at that point in time really wanted to sell. It was really, I would say we were the first major player in Atlantic Canada to sell when we sold to Rogers. And that, the industry was consolidating fast. It was a business of scale. And the business of a very capital-intensive business, because everyone was switching from the old coaxial cable to the fiber optic, which was massive investment. So it was the right thing to do. I think we sold at a really good time.
Oh, I want to ask you about another funny story, and it has to do with a photo of you and Danny.
Oh God, there's probably lots of those around.
But I think this one was actually published at least once, and it was a photo of you and Danny Williams dressed up as Carmen Miranda, who, for folks who don't know, was a very famous starlet and singer back in the 1930s and 40s, and she was famous for wearing a hat that kind of looked like a bowl of fruit on top of her head. Yeah. You guys were dressed up like Carmen Miranda. What is the story behind that?
So, I mean, with Danny, we were always either playing jokes on each other or up to some hijinks. And so we were at a cable convention, and at the time there was probably 100 different cable companies. And every year at the cable convention, the gentleman who worked at McLean Hunter, which was a big cable company at the time by the name of Paul Brown, and he was a real wine guy, and the guy out Western Canada in Kelowna, George Galbraith, they would have a wine tasting competition every year, West versus East. And so I said to Danny, let's show up and let's, because it was a bit dry, and pardon the pun, but so let's liven it up. So we went out to a costume shop, got the costumes, and showed up like that.
What was the reaction?
It was a lot of laughs. And there was many costumes to come, I might add.
Oh, okay.
Thankfully, well, there might be some pictures, but you didn't see those ones.
Yeah. So what did you take away from your experience at Cable Atlantic? What lessons did you learn that helped you when you moved up the ladder yet again to Rogers Communications, where you became vice president of the cable unit? Yeah,
I was chief operating officer. Yeah. That was part of the deal when we sold the cable companies, that Rogers, I had to commit to Rogers for 3 years, which I wasn't really, I didn't want to do, but it was worth getting the deal done. And so for 3 years I commuted every week back and forth to Toronto, much to Ted Rogers' chagrin, because he wanted me to move and I didn't want to move my family. But What did I learn? I mean, it's a team game. It's absolutely a team game. And so we had some just absolutely incredible, what I thought were great managers and really smart guys here. We had, Paul Hatcher, Gilbert Bennett, Kenny Marshall, Jerry George, Mel Taylor. We had a really fun management team who were smart. We were innovating. We were young, so we didn't mind taking chances. And so I think, that helped. That we all leaned on each other, and there was really no captains of the ship. I was probably the cheerleader, but. So we all learned, and we learned a lot. And I think we were viewed as a very innovative company in the cable industry. We were the first one in the telephone business.
So then you found yourself in Toronto, sitting in on meetings with the legendary Ted Rogers.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, his lineage was remarkable because his father before him.
Yes.
Was literally an inventor,
Yeah.
invented a vacuum tube that created, believe it or not, batteryless radios,
Yeah.
and founded CFRB Radio,
Yeah.
and then his son builds this huge communications conglomerate.
Yeah.
How intimidating was it going to work for this guy, and what was he like? How did he treat you?
Ted, well, I think Ted always had a soft spot for the news. He at one meeting I remember I had to tell Ted, because he was telling everybody, we want to be like these guys down there, and it was almost like I was an immigrant. I said, Ted, Newfoundland's a part of Canada, and but he was hard driving. He was, I think, because he was so successful, he didn't really have innate trust in people. He always thought people, because he was the grand poobah, were feeding him a line. So he test and retest, and so intense, to say the least. Great sense of humor, though, but intense to work for. He treated his people, financially and benefits and all that superbly, but man, he was tough to work for. I remember one night being in my office, because I was commuting, so I'd be at my office most nights. It was probably 10 or 11 o'clock, and I get a call from Ted, who's upstairs, a couple of floors above me. He used to sleep in the office some evenings. He had a little bedroom off his office, and he's in his PJs, and he calls me up. He said, I want to know why TSN is on channel 22 in Musgrave Harbour. Now, Musgrave Harbour had 400 subs. Now, we had about 2.5 million subs. That was the level of detail.
That is incredible. That blows me away.
Oh, listen, that was Ted. You weren't putting anything past him.
Wow.
So yeah, he was incredible. And I learned a ton there. So I always said to the gang here, to our staff, we were probably 200 strong when we sold to Rogers. Look, we're going to have more impact on Rogers than Rogers is going to have on us. I think we did. I think all the folks here all went to better and bigger things at Rogers, and I think we brought a very customer-focused passion to the business that maybe as a big monopoly they didn't have. So.
Speaking of customers, I want to get a grasp on this, the size of the operation that you were in charge of, the cable unit. What was your subscription base at that time?
2.3 million customers, plus probably 1 million internet customers, and our footprint for the most part was Ontario East. By the time I joined, then we had New Brunswick. We didn't have anything in Nova Scotia. But then, you do a lot of work for the wireless at the same time, too. So one of my jobs is leading the cable division. I think we had 8,000 employees at the time. I did a town hall every quarter. So I went right around to everybody and met with all staff every quarter. Here's goals and objectives. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Give me feedback on what we're screwing up. So it was exhausting. During that 3-year stretch, I was doing 200 flights a year, including getting on a flight on Wednesdays and flying home at lunchtime to coach my kids' basketball game and getting back on a flight the next morning 5 a.m. and being in the office at 9. So I'd never do that again at the time. You're just running and gunning, you're just trying to put food on the table. So you're not smart enough to think about your lifestyle, but it was intense.
So after Rogers, you get the opportunity to basically run a pretty big show for yourself. You went with Persona Communications as their CEO, and Persona, I believe at the time, was the 5th largest communications company in the country.
Right.
How daunting was that, and what was it like?
That was a breath of fresh air. So I signed on to a 3-year deal with Rogers. So on the very last day of the 3rd year, I walked out the door and walked into Persona. So I became partners with a group out of Dallas called Hicks Muse. And Tom Hicks, you might know, is the owner of the Texas Rangers and of the Texas the Stars, the Dallas Stars, the hockey team. And so it was a great experience for me because, I had ownership in the business, learned a lot from those guys because they had they had business investments all over the globe, of which I got involved in over time. And so, but the beauty for me was head office was here in St. John's. So I was home. And, very young family, 4 boys. And so that was like, still a ton of travel, but it was just better. And so it was nice. And also in a big company like Rogers, it's very, it's big, there's a lot of bureaucracy, et cetera. We were pretty nimble. I brought all the old team back together, and so it was, we had a lot of fun.
So after Persona was sold to?
Eastlink.
Eastlink.
Yeah. And I had a great friendship with John Bragg. I was the chair of the Canadian Cable Television Association for a number of years. And so I got to know John Bragg really well. He was the Nova Scotia representative on the board, so we spent a lot of time traveling back and forth together. So really when we decided as a board it was a good time to sell, I just picked up the phone and called John. And we had the deal done. And I think I phoned him on Easter weekend on a Good Friday, and I think I faxed a handwritten contract to him that was signed.
So you managed that
hours.
deal yourself,
Yes.
pretty much?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Much to the chagrin of the board, because I didn't tell them until after it was done. That's a story. But,
well,
anyway,
that brings me to my next question. How important is communication in business when you talk about employees, customers, obviously, partners, stakeholders?
Yeah.
How important is it to?
It's everything. I mean, it's kind of like the golden rule. I mean, if you're fortunate enough to lead a company, there's 3 things you do. You go in, you assess it. The second thing you do is say, what do I want it to be, or what do we want it to be? And then you communicate like hell. So that's why I was doing road shows constantly to all our staff at Rogers every quarter, because everyone has to, I think you'll often hear managers say, I don't understand why they didn't do that. I told them, yeah, but you have to tell them a million times, and you need feedback, because it's a team game. There's no, if you're an autocrat, I can tell you you're going to fail. It's just, it has to be a team game. And of course, I can tell you here, when we were at Cable Atlantic, we didn't care where the great ideas came from. But if it came from anywhere and we thought it was good, we jumped on it. So, it's all about really listening and learning. But you have to keep selling the message, whatever that is. It's almost like politics, right? You just got to keep repeating yourself. Very important.
Dean, if you were to sit back and look at yourself, and compared yourself with people of your age, and you started out probably with the same ability, the same drive, same level of education, so on and so forth, and yet you made it really big. They maybe didn't get quite as far, or maybe didn't go anywhere. What would you say you had going for you that they didn't have going for them?
Luck. It's a lot of luck, but fortune finds a prepared mind. So, you work your ass off, and lots of times you get lucky. So I think I was in the right spot at the right time. A nascent industry in cable. I joined it right just before it launched, into the stratosphere. So, you can't take yourself too seriously that, you think you had some secret sauce or something. I think I worked hard. like very hard. I don't think I was entrepreneurial when I started. I was probably, scared of my own shadow in that regard. But I worked with a gentleman, Danny, who was just, just high risk taker, tough, and so you learn. So I was always surrounded by really good people, and I learned, and But at the end of the day, you need some breaks, and I think I got lots, more than most.
Here's a business question.
Yeah.
You've done business in Canada, you've done business in the United States, you've done business probably in every province of the country.
Oh, yeah.
What's it like doing business in Canada? How easy is it to do business in Canada? And does every province roll out the red carpet when you knock on their door and say, I want to start a business in New Brunswick or Ontario or whatever?
There's ebb and flow to that. First off, I don't think you'll ever find a business person who says that government responds quick enough or is helpful enough. Business wants to move way faster than generally the public governments do, but the public governments have a job to do, and so I understand that. Some provinces, when Frank McKenna was Premier of New Brunswick, he transformed that business, because I remember one day calling the number in the newspaper, and he answered the phone. Wow. I couldn't, that is aggressive in a positive way. That's someone who wants to be transformational, and he transformed that province. And so, I would say Quebec is difficult to work with, only because I worked, with them or against them, however you view that, when I was chair of Hydro. But also, language barrier is huge. It really complicates matter. I love, I still have business in Quebec. So, but it's just tougher. That extra layer of complexity makes it tougher. And I would say Quebec and Newfoundland are very much alike in terms of very parochial. We're always looking out for ourselves in a positive sense, but probably a chip on our shoulder because we've been done wrong, so to speak. So, but generally speaking, the West is pretty easy to work with. But it really depends who's leading it and what government is in. It changes from time to time.
So you mentioned Hydro. You were chair of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro.
Yes.
What was it like devising strategy for an electricity provider as opposed to communications company?
Well, I was chair under Danny, under Brian Tobin, under Grimes, and under Beaton Tug. So I had 4 different premiers, different sides of the aisle.
That's a good stretch.
Yeah, it was. I was in and out of those roles, but I don't think I brought any intelligence to how to make a kilowatt fly around the province. That's for sure. And when you're on the board or chair, as I was, of Hydro, let's be clear. You're there because the government thinks you're friendly. And they're hoping that you agree with their policy, and you're an advocate for that. When you get there, you'll realize that you sometimes have to save the government from itself. And so it's a very weird kind of dynamic, because you don't have the independence as you normally would as a board, because government is saying, this is what we're doing, sign. And when I went through an exercise with the Grimes government where they wanted to approve the Lower Churchill deal, and I had a call. I was with Rogers in Toronto. I had a call and said, look, the Premier's office wants you to call a meeting tomorrow and sign off on this agreement we have. I said, I'd like to read it. To them, that seemed like an absolutely incredible thing that we'd want to read it.
Wow.
And so we got into that, let me tell you, and I'm glad we did. And so it's really delicate to balance being, you're trying to be a friend of the government, but at the same token, your responsibility is to everyone in the province, and your responsibility is to them. They put you in, and despite the fact they might really not want you to do anything, you're really, just in terms of corporate governance, that's your role, and as a director, you're personally liable for the decisions you make. So, when I was chair under Grimes, I brought in a gentleman named Gar Emerson, who was the premier governance lawyer in Canada, and brought him in to say, tell us how this should be set up and how government should be running this. That doesn't make it very popular, by the way, but it was. I think it was in the best interest of the province.
Dean, you when you were in communications, certainly you saw an awful lot of innovation in the industry. I mean, starting in cable, and then moving into fiber, high-speed internet, streaming. How important is it to encourage innovation when you're in business?
If the minute you stop, you're done. And I think we all suffer from complacency from time to time, and if you think the business you have is bulletproof, well, you're gonna wake up and gonna be surprised. I remember being in this studio, having come back from a conference in the U.S. where I bought a satellite dish, DirecTV dish, and in those days you could get a fake address in Buffalo that allowed you to stream the service here, even though. So the dish was here, but the billing address was in Buffalo. So I got all the staff together, and I put the dish on, and I fired up the TV and said, look at this, bam, 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 bam. Went through the gazillion channels and said, now, takes me 15 minutes to go to Best Buy to buy it, takes me a few minutes to install it. We're taking 10 to 15 days to install your cable or answer the phone. And so guess what, guys, and we're going to have to start doing installs on weekends and evenings, and because that's what our customers shouldn't have to take a day off for the privilege of buying our product. And there's someone out there I can go 579-1100, and they're willing to be there in 35 minutes for $12 pizza. So that was transformational technology at the time, and now the industry has lapped that, and now it's fiber optics and it's wireless, and so it's going to continue to change, and you better have a good relationship with your customers, because if you take them for granted, they're going to jump ship in a minute.
Dean, I wish we had more time, but we are absolutely out of time. But
that went fast.
It was a real pleasure sitting down for a conversation with you.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Well, I appreciate that. Nice to see you, Karl.
And that is our program for today. Please join us again next time.